What's up, my friends? How's it going today? I'm going to try to make this video without getting too wrapped up and focused in what I'm saying at the moment. In other words, I want to be able to take breaks and relax, take a puff, take a vape, take a sip of coffee, which is often my intention when I start making videos about subjects like this, and then I get really into it and doesn't give myself time to really reflect on what I'm saying as I'm saying it. And the subject I'm tackling here is higher levels of consciousness, or higher states of consciousness, which by merely stating that, I'm already implying that I assume that there are states of consciousness that are higher. And a person might be inclined to ask, well, what do you mean by a higher state? It's a very vague, general statement about consciousness, but I believe that in our daily state of mind, if you will, let's just say that there are benefits to the way that our brain operates, the way that our neurochemistry functions. It allows us to be able to, let's say, react in a fight or flight situation, or to be able to, cool our body down when we're hot, warm ourselves up when we're cold. There's a lot of processes going on within the body and the mind, and they're interconnected to the point where if our external world, is interfering with our ability to think, it would make it very difficult for a person to, say, concentrate. Let's say a person who's studying when they're in pain, and their signals that are, their brain is getting mixed signals. You're trying to remember things, but you're also dealing with the pain. And as a person who's had chronic pain, I'm well aware of how this operates. It also, in fact, I'm sitting here the reason why I'm moving my chair a lot is because I have sciatica, and I'm so used to it over the years that it's really just become kind of part of life. It comes and goes through the seasons, but it's part of my body, My body isn't me, but... So I took some notes here that I've got on my little paper, and it's really hard to remember exactly what I want to say. To start off, what I'm trying to get at here is the idea that we can train and untrain our brains to do certain things, or to think certain ways. If you are always on the defensive, let me give you a raw example. If you're always the kind of person who is very easily angered, let's say, and let's say you work on anger management and you better yourself to the point where people say things that don't anger you anymore, where you think, wow, that used to bother me, or that would have really bugged me at one time, but it doesn't anymore. Right there, that is training your brain, and that is a, if you will, higher state of consciousness. It means that you're able to cope with your feelings a little bit better. People who are the most easily angered and the most easily upset tend to be the least stable in their, let's just say, their search for their own truth in their own minds. Often, not always, but like sensitivity is manifest of our overabundance of emotions that we have pent up within us, and we don't learn how to deal with them in constructive ways. So what happens is, like, our brains, we have brain centers that are reserved for certain operations. For example, you have your speech center and your sight center, right? And these are just vague general areas. It doesn't mean that that's absolutely all it can work for. It's not like the parts of a car where a piston's a piston and a muffler's a muffler. You have neurons and neurochemistry going on that can alter and change the way your brain functions. And this means that a person who loses their sight at age 20, the sight centers in their brain can rewire and be used for other needs, such as hearing, and the hearing center of the brain can actually enlarge. We know that parts of the brain will actually increase in size as a reflection of musical talent, or people who are savants or have an extreme talent. And it's very difficult to measure these things because there's a lot of individuality at play as well. I'll make sure the camera's still going. So what I started thinking of how I could try to define this, what I'm going at with higher consciousness, and you think of the brain as a computer, and people will call it a quantum computer, if you will, but Let's just imagine, for the metaphor and argument's sake, that in your daily mode of operation, your brain works in a binary way. You want to call upon a memory or an idea. It would work in a metaphoric, binary code, if you will, ones and zeros. Now let's just say you introduce something else like a mystical experience to the picture. It's almost as if you go from, that old mechanical computing from binary to quantum computing, where you have many different options. This is what psychedelics do to me. They open up my mind to the point where I'm able to access many different fronts that ordinarily would just be ones and zeros, where I have to go to one thought or another thought. And you can start to pull ideas together with the senses and realize the bigger picture of what's going on. And I've kind of argued in my own mind over the years of whether or not it's a delusion, whether or not it matters, whether or not psychedelics just create almost an air of amazement that makes you think that it's a mystical experience. And to give an example, anyone who's taken psychedelics knows if you have an amazing revelation sometimes, and you might write it down, and then the next day it doesn't seem to make sense at all or be a revelation at all. There are times when you can, let's just say, have an overabundance of strong feelings behind an idea or something that you believe is true and believe is real, and your feelings tell you that's real and you can't convey that. That's different than what I'm talking about here, which is a feeling of a higher state of mind that you can't convey. It's like if you haven't been there. Anybody can tell you a story about something. Somebody once, I think it was Manly Hall, say that you could read about Egypt for 20 years, and it wouldn't do you any good as compared to a 1-week visit or even a 1-day visit over there. And that would be like trying to express a mystical experience is nearly impossible, and trying to express a higher state of consciousness is impossible. When I reach these states, it's almost like I wish I had my voice recorder handy, and I know I have one, I have a couple. It's just that I seem to just keep these moments to myself, almost like it's just too much to deal with later. And when I'm in my sober state of mind, if you will, like right now, it's hard for me to assimilate and orchestrate and organize and vocalize all these ideas I have about the feelings I have towards this higher consciousness, if you will. I believe that these states exist. I know that they can be achieved through meditation. I know there's an argument between meditation and psychedelics, and some people would say, well, if you want to do it naturally, you don't take psychedelics, you just do yoga, or you meditate, or you put yourself in a deprivation tank. I've done that too. All of these are great methods, but psychedelics honestly are the quickest and easiest way to obtain a state of connection with your own brain to such a strong degree for just the right amount of time in order to try to kind of have some ideas, assimilate the ideas, and then walk away from it going, wait a minute, I need a break. So we go into these states of mind. It would be kind of like a person who is mesmerized or, who's being hypnotized. It's only like 15% of the population is really strongly hypnotizable. And it depends on whether you want to be hypnotized. And for those who do, it can be very beneficial. Imagine a field in which we're immersed in. And, what I picture is like a brain like a sponge, if you will, where when it's dry, it's very difficult for connections to be made. When it's immersed in a certain field, new connections are able to be made. And that's just a metaphor or an archetype for it, but it's the best way I can explain it. A lot of people call this the field, or I won't get into the specific terms. There are a lot of different, modern day speakers that talk about these things, but I find that they come up short trying to define them more often than not. It's something like, we know that something exists out there that is beyond comprehension, beyond words, ineffable, but some people choose to try to define it. Make sure the camera's still going. Good. All right. So what else? Yes, I was using this metaphor here with the animals. And this is how I'm trying to define. If I were to tell you that I've had a mystical experience, a connection with a higher state of mind, let's just say that you questioned that and said, well, how can you prove that? I would instantly say I can't, and I won't try. And the metaphor I came up was think about animals who are very intelligent, who can decipher language of people. For example, there's crows, there's dogs. Crows might not respond very well to vocal cues yet, as far as we know, but they're very, very observant, and they can figure anything out. Puzzles beyond anything that a dog could probably figure out. But dogs can understand thousands of words, probably, because, well, at least, I think it's at least a couple hundred words, if I'm not mistaken, but a lot of words that can be trained, and perhaps that's a genetic thing, where us raising dogs over thousands of years, they're just predisposed to want to hear command words from us. But they haven't had the need to use a stick to get food out of a cage like a crow. What I'm saying is there are different types of intelligence. So if I were to come up to you and tell you I had a mystical experience and a connection with a divine intelligence, and you would say, how do you describe it? I would say I can't. But the best metaphor I came up with was, imagine one of these animals, an intelligent animal. I guess we could use a parrot, for example. Perhaps let's just use a primate, like an orangutan. You can teach an orangutan to do all types of things, to understand some language and certain words and whatnot. You could teach a group of 10 orangutans separately, okay? You could teach them all different English words and teach them all to do these amazing things that humans do. And then put them in a room together. Now, how do you think they would communicate that to each other? They can't, as far as we know, and I'm just kind of being speculative here, but you can train several animals of one species to learn human behaviors or human commands, but when you put them in there, they can't confer together to say, hey, I had this experience with humans. Oh, so did I. What words did they use for you? Now, I know people might say, hey, that's not true. They do communicate, and I know animals talk, but I think you understand what I'm getting at here. The animals, if you considered their connection with a human to be a mystical experience, for example, they wouldn't be able to express it to each other, but they've all had the same experience. And this would be the same way I would say all the people around the world who have had connections with the ether, with God, with the devil, with it, whatever you want to name these different forces of energy. And I feel like I call it the all, because that's kind of the, in the Alexandria and the mystery schools, they would call it the all, because it is all encompassing. And as soon as you say God and the devil, you're compartmentalizing the universe. You're compartmentalizing energy. And you're assuming the role of one who can box ideas in. And assuming you know what's evil and what's good. And these issues just run really deep. So, for me, the philosophy has to be simple. Has to be, what's the best way to live in this life? And that would be obviously to just kind of go with the flow. But it begs the question, can we obtain higher states if we choose to? What are the yogis after? And what are the gurus obtaining? What is a bodhisattva? And do we really obtain any state of Buddhahood? Or are people who are enlightened just deluding themselves into a state of bliss? And if so, does it matter? And I think that what really matters more than anything is obtaining a state of happiness and contentment. So, if you want to label that as awareness or intellect, or if you want to label that as enlightenment, or if you just want to label it as money, so be it. Whatever moves you in your life. I think I said this. Oh yeah, that's it for my notes, I guess. I was trying to read kind of something I wrote. It was just about how we can't explain these things to each other, and they're just impossible. Very difficult. And for me to sit here for however many 10, 15 minutes I've been making this video here. 14 minutes. I just wanted to kind of share that, my take on altered states. And so now to kind of sum up some of my thoughts on it, and I've had people ask me, some of my subscribers, for example, don't even know that I take psychedelics because I don't really mention it very often, and those who have watched my videos for a while, they know, but it's not something that I talk about as often as I think about, and I think about them a lot because they are amazing keys to the mind. But only lately have I really been thinking hard about, and today in particular, it was earlier this morning, and I thought about LSD. And I thought, might be nice to just take a small dose for the day. And then I thought about it for a minute and thought, no, if I can't go all the way, it's not really that great. It's just kind of an irritant. And then I thought, it's amazing that I would even consider taking something that scary to some people just on a whim, on any old day. And I realized that people who have never taken LSD and the stories that people have heard about it, it could lead them to think that it's absolutely nuts, psychotic, like a crazy drug. And I was considering this morning why certain people react to these substances the way they do. And it's something I already knew, I just hadn't thought about in a while, which is the control factor. Everyone I know who's ever had bad experiences on psychedelics, for the most part, have had control issues, where they were trying to, they cannot let themselves just go. And that's what ego loss is with psychedelics. And ego loss is a huge part of these higher states of consciousness, because only when you set your own ego aside can you start to see what other people are thinking and feeling and truly understand it. And you can obtain that through meditation and patience and natural means. But psilocybin, for example, a simple mushroom that grows on, it grows on dung. I mean, come on. It's something that's been with us for a long time and seems to help people to obtain a different state of mind, if you will. And serotonin is our kind of reality chemical that keeps us in our normal, happy, average, balanced state to an extent. That's very generalized, but psilocybin and LSD look almost identical, very similar to psilocybin, and those keys fit those locks in different ways and allow our minds to just kind of slow down and open up some new doors and move into those doors of perception, if you will. I mean, there's a reason why highly intelligent people have been writing books about psychedelics for, as long as they've been around, because they are a huge benefit to the intellects of this world, but also just the average person. You don't have to be a genius. I'm just an average person. I'm not an intellect. When I say that, I'm not putting myself in that category. And I'm really glad, because, trying to overly rationalize everything intellectually is something that just goes nowhere. There has to be a mystical side to what you feel and see, and for some people, letting down that guard and to say, hey, there's things I believe that I can't prove, or that I even believe in a fairy man in the sky, whatever it might be. If you truly feel strongly about what you believe, you should never be embarrassed. And some people will hide their religion because they're afraid of being attacked. For me, it's like, I believe the universe is conscious and it's a giant brain. What of it? Bring it on. I mean, I have I'm very convinced that the universe is conscious and aware of itself. But in the same way that we can't study our own minds because we are the conscious observer, the universe is in the exact same state. So the brain of the universe can't think for itself. Therefore, it creates, if you will, the cells of the universe, or us. We are the eyes of the world, the eyes of the universe, experiencing it, experiencing ourselves. It makes us part of everything. In certain states of mind, I see that so clearly, yet I could never define or prove it to anyone. But that's just it. Don't need to. It speaks for itself. If I had to say anything about believing in a higher power, I would say it's not about fooling yourself, and it's not about believing that God gives a shit about you as an individual. There are so many different varieties of God. We have personal gods, then we have the all-encompassing all, which doesn't care about individuals. Knowing that my consciousness came from dust and will return to dust, I know that the higher mind of myself belongs to the universe, and that my thoughts will never die, that my ideas and the experiences that I've had will never go anywhere. They are always existing in this timelessness, if you will. Every time I think about someone from the past, they're alive, They don't have to be consciously aware of it, and I think our consciousness is kind of overstated in what it is. Now, there are times when I've had these amazing experiences where I realize that everything is just layered, that we're living in these little boom, 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 these little segments of life that all lead into this big picture, and the absurdity of it all is just overwhelming, you know. And I laugh at it, and I laugh at who we are and who I am. And that's what's allowed me to deal with death, is allowing myself to see that higher states of mind can be achieved, and that in those states, it's not about convincing yourself that you're going to be preserved forever in, you know, some beautiful, perfect, conscious state of bliss in an orb or something. It's change, that everything is change. We are change. And so those little peaks in those higher states of mind are so clear that they're crisper than anything you have in your day-to-day sober life, if you will. So that's why a person who's taken a heavy dose of psychedelics might have an eye-opening moment that is so real that their day-to-day life seems like almost a dream in comparison. And who's to say that it isn't? So, peace everybody, and all that stuff, subscribe, and crap that people say, and Patreon, and fun stuff, and love you all. Talk to you later.